Lecture 13, Perfect Competition Continued. Before we get started on the graphing on perfect competition again, let's look at a few terms. First off, we're going to be using this term allocative efficiency through the remainder of microeconomics. Allocative efficiency is when the price paid by the consumer is equal to the additional cost of the last unit produced. You may want to stop this video and write down these definitions when I give them to you because, again, they will become important as we go through all the different forms of competition inside of microeconomics. So allocative efficiency, when the price paid by the consumer is equal to the additional cost of the last unit produced, is really P is equal to marginal cost. The price is equal to the marginal cost. We call this allocative efficiency because for the producer to produce an additional item, the additional costs start to climb. As each additional cost begins to climb, the firm is using up additional resources to produce that next item. So the marginal cost are the resources that are used to produce that next item. On the flip side, the consumer pays a price for this last unit that is produced. And the price that the consumer pays came from the use of the resources that the consumer used to receive that financial price, whether it was their wage or salary, whether it was interest on a savings account or some investment. They use the value of their resources to pay for the value of the resources produced by the producer. That is why we call this allocative efficiency. Some textbooks use the term economic efficiency. We're going to use the term allocative efficiency. The next term is productive efficiency. Productive efficiency is when the firm produces at the lowest point on the average total cost curve. This deals with the producer, nothing to deal with the consumer. So a producer, whenever they're producing at the lowest point on the average total cost curve, you already learned that marginal cost touches average total cost at its lowest point. The producer is trying to reduce their average total cost and become productively efficient, but that is not the main goal of the business. The main goal of the business is to maximize profits. We looked at the term diminishing marginal returns, and the previous definition that I gave you in a previous lecture was when a firm adds more and more of a variable input to a fixed input, the additional output begins to go down. But there's another definition for diminishing marginal returns. When a firm adds more and more of a variable input to a fixed input, the additional costs begin to rise. As you add more and more of, let's say, a wage worker to a fixed input, a machine, as the additional output begins to fall because people are waiting to get at that machine, that means each additional worker produces fewer additional items, which drives up the additional cost of producing that item. So there are two definitions again for diminishing marginal returns. When a firm adds more and more of a variable input to a fixed input, the additional output begins to go down. Or when a firm adds more and more of a variable input to a fixed input, the additional costs begin to rise as that additional output begins to go down. So we're really talking at the point where MC is at its lowest point. Beyond that point, diminishing marginal returns begins to drive up the price of producing that next additional unit in the marketplace. We're going to take a look at the graph on corn farming. This looks a little difficult at first when you first take a look at this graph, but I'm going to take this step by step. On the graph, we're going to go ahead and show the original quantity and the individual firm, what that firm should produce. We know that the original price in the industry is P and Q. And since the individual firm is a price taker, it must or it will take this market price. This is the market price, and the individual firm will take that market price. You learned that in a previous lecture on perfect competition. Next, if you were to put your pen on this graph to determine the quantity of units the individual firm would produce, could you draw the dashed line down and label it Q0 if you had to do that on this graph? We know that the firm maximizes profits where MR is equal to MC. We know this is Mr. DARP, so that's MR is equal to MC at this point. If you draw at point A, and we'll go ahead and label that point A, if I draw a dashed line from that point downward to Q, we know that the individual farmer will produce Q0 units. Is this farmer earning an economic profit or an economic loss at Q0? Go ahead and look at the graph. Can you tell me by looking at the graph what the area is of total revenue? Remember, total revenue is the price, P0, times the quantity, Q0, to give us the area of 0, this is just a point we'll say on the graph, 0, P0, A, Q0. What is the area now of total costs? The area of total cost is figured by, if you know the average total cost right here at point A, then you will know the total. If this point A is the same dollar amount as P, then we know that the total cost is 0, P0, A, Q0, and that the firm is earning an economic profit equal to 0. That doesn't mean they're losing money. From our previous discussion on this, you know that they're not losing any money. They're earning what they would have earned with those resources if they were used someplace else. Is the firm allocatively efficient at point A? Yes, the firm is allocatively efficient and the market is allocatively efficient. How do we know that? Because the price is equal to the marginal cost at that output. We know that P is equal to MC. The next question is it productively efficient at point A? The answer is yes. It is operating at the lowest point on its average total cost curve. At P0, then, the firm is allocatively and productively efficient, and the market is allocatively efficient. Allocative efficiency, when this occurs, this is where we maximize consumer surplus and producer surplus. You might want to write that in your notes. Allocative efficiency is where consumer surplus and producer surplus is maximized. Now, this is the corn market, we'll say, in a perfectly competitive market in long-run equilibrium, or in this situation, short-run or long-run equilibrium. Something happens in the marketplace. As you well know, all things aren't held constant, ceteris paribus. Research finds that eating corn causes, we'll say, farts. I had to think of something bad that corn does. What do you think is going to happen to the market for corn if it causes farts? The answer is it depends. There could be national farting contests by fraternities and sororities, or there could be best-selling books written about the advantages of farting, such as The Gas We Pass, which is a true book. And let's say it becomes a bestseller and people just like to eat corn because they like to fart. I had to think of something bad, sorry. Anyway, we know that the demand for corn in the market or the industry will decrease, driving the price down and the quantity down. As demand decreases, the industry price goes down, or the market price goes down, and the quantity in the industry or market also goes down. We know that the individual farmer is a price taker and must take that market price. We know it's allocatively efficient here, where consumer and producer surplus is maximized, and we know also that it is allocatively efficient at this point right here, where the price is equal to the marginal cost right at this point here. So it's allocatively efficient here, allocatively efficient here. We know now that the individual farmer is going to produce Q1 units, wherever the price or MR, this is the new MR, is equal to MC. At this point, we know that the total revenue, this is point C now, we know that the total revenue is what area? Go ahead and look at the graph and see if you could determine what is the area of total revenue at Q1 units. The area of total revenue is P times Q, so it'd be this P times Q, and the area would be labeled 0, P1, C, Q1. At Q1, what is the average total cost of producing Q1 units? The average total cost is B, which is the same dollar amount as A. This is the dollar amount here. If we know that this is the average total cost, which is equal to this point as far as an amount, then we know that if we know the average total cost, we could figure the total cost by taking the average times the quantity, which would give us 0, A, B, Q1. Which area is larger, the total revenue or the total cost? The area of total cost is larger. By what amount? Go ahead and look at this graph. The area of loss then is P1, A, B, C. The farmer now is earning a loss. Should the farmer exit the marketplace? They're earning a loss. Go ahead, think about it. Should the farmer exit the marketplace? The answer is no. The farmer should stay in business even though he or she is operating at a loss. Let's see why. Do you notice at Q1, the farmer is able to pay all of its average variable cost and in fact, all of its variable cost. This point right here is the average variable cost of producing Q1 units. The farmer, and this dashed line is just above that price line there. Pretend like that price 2 line isn't even there. This area here is the total variable cost of producing. If we know the average, then this is the total. If this is the average total cost of producing, then the total cost of production is this whole area right here. So this area at this dashed line up to A over to B back down to this dashed line is the fixed cost, the total fixed cost of production. Is the farmer now at this price able to cover some of these fixed costs? The answer is yes. This is why the farmer should stay in business, because it's covering some of its fixed costs. It's able to cover all of its variable costs and have some money left over to cover some of its fixed costs. It should stay in business. Why? The reason it should stay in business is if it closes its doors, which costs does the business still have to pay? The business still has to pay the fixed cost. But if it has some money to pay some of the fixed costs, where does it get the rest of the money that it's losing out on to pay the other part of the fixed cost? This is where the farmer now has to run to his local banker and say, can we remodify my loan? Can we do this? You know that corn has caused farts in the market and the market has been bad. Can we maybe reduce some of my payments or give me a break on some of my payments or none of my payments, extend those payments farther into the future, and then I can pay you as the market gets better, and could you help us out? Now, the banker is probably going to help the farmer out because remember, if this is the industry or the market, it's happening to all farmers, that all farmers are incurring a loss. And so they're all going to come to the bank to see if they could remodify their loan. And if they can, great. But if they can't, then what the bank is left with is all of these foreclosed farms. So a lot of times the bank will go ahead and remodify. Anyway, As you can tell by this line, something bad is going to happen in the market. New research finds that corn causes hemorrhoids. Now corn causes farts and it causes hemorrhoids. What do you think is going to happen to the market or the industry for corn? Demand is going to decrease. As demand decreases, this drives the industry price down and the industry quantity down. Since the individual firm is a price taker, it will take the market price. As it takes the market price, there's a new MR. You find out where MR is equal to MC, and the individual farmer will produce fewer units of output. At that quantity now, we know that the total revenue is 0 P2 D Q2. At this point, is covering all of its average variable costs. Take this line and go straight up to the average total cost curve. We'll plot a dot. We'll make that point F, and we know that that dollar amount of F is also equal to the dollar amount of E. The total cost now is equal to 0 E F Q2. What is the economic loss equal to? The economic loss now is P2 E F D. Should the individual farmer stay in business or should it shut down? Go ahead and think about it. The individual farmer is indifferent at this point on whether to stay in business or shut down. Let's see why. First off, does this price pick up all of the variable cost of production? We know D is on the average variable cost curve. We know then that 0 P2 D Q2 is not only the total revenue, but it's also the total variable cost. But the farmer has no money left over to pay which cost? What is this area of P2 EFD? This is the area of fixed cost. The farmer now has no revenue left over to pay any of its fixed cost. The farmer can do this. The farmer could shut down if he or she wants to. If it shuts down, it still has to pay the fixed cost. The farmer is indifferent on staying in business or shutting down. But the farmer does look to the future. If the farmer believes the future is going to look brighter, then they may want to run back to the banker and see if they can remodify the loan again. Let's say that this farmer thinks that the industry is going to look better in the future, runs back to the banker. The farmer knows that all these other farmers are in business and they're earning economic losses equal to their fixed costs. And the banker definitely doesn't want to get into the foreclosure business. What should the banker do? Well, obviously it depends on the credit rating and so forth, past history of the farmer. And let's say that the banker decides to extend the loans, remodify the loans, and the farmers all remain in business thinking that the market's going to get good. Well, you can tell already that the market is not going to get good. That new research shows that corn rots your teeth. Demand in the marketplace decreases to P3, driving the industry price down and the industry quantity down. If you were to draw a dashed line on this graph right here, could you indicate where small q3 would go? Take your time and look at the graph. If you put a dashed line because you know that this new price is equal to MR and you produce wherever MR is equal to MC and put Q3 right here, you are wrong. Why are you wrong? Because at this point, here's the total revenue. This area right here, this is the total revenue. Does that total revenue bring in enough money to pay all of the average fixed costs? Let's take a look at this. If you put a Q3 right here, The total revenue is this area right here. At that point, this now is the average variable cost right above this line. Does the farmer bring in enough revenue to cover all of its variable costs? No. And it definitely doesn't have any money left over to cover any of its fixed costs. It has to cover all of these fixed costs plus these lost out variable costs. The farmer is forced to shut down. Let's see why the farmer is forced to shut down. If the farmer can't cover its variable costs, it's Friday afternoon. The workers haven't been paid for 2 weeks. They come up to the farmhouse, and you as the farmer don't have enough money to pay your wage workers. Let me tell you why you're forced to shut down. What they're going to do is put a noose around your neck, take you to the nearest tree, and hang you. You're forced to shut down. Just kidding you. They're not going to do, well, they might do it. If you realize that businesses can continue to operate at a loss in the short run, year after year after year, as long as they cover which cost, the businesses must be able to cover their variable cost of production. We hope this gives you a better idea of what happens in the marketplace in the short run if price falls below the point of economic profit equal to zero.